I'm going to give you 6 reasons for why US will never be able to win the war. Everything about this war begins with one narrow strip of water. And that narrow strip of water is called as the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, it is barely 33 kilometers wide. And this tiny corridor carries roughly 20% of the world's oil supply every single day. Tankers from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Iraq, and Qatar all funnel through the same passage before heading towards East and then Europe. Now, Iran has said that pass through this way and I'll fucking burn you. Iran doesn't need to close the strait completely, also, just the threat of drones and missile strikes, and of course, burning is enough to freeze the global shipping altogether. Insurance companies have completely panicked. Tanker operators are hesitating and they have dropped anchors in and around the strait, not moving an inch. And as always, freight premiums, that is the health insurance of the ships, they have skyrocketed overnight. Suddenly, everything has come to a halt, oil exports have collapsed, and we know the vicious cycle. When oil exports collapse, energy prices surge, manufacturing costs explode, airlines raise ticket prices, and food transportation becomes even more expensive. And as a result of this, inflation spreads across the continents. So Iran doesn't care about attacking US on its own soil. First, they make the people, that is the countries, around them uncomfortable. Once pressure appears here, the war stops being about missiles and fighter jets. It becomes a financial trigger point. And the funny part, the United States is deeply tied to the global financial stability. Iran does not depend on that system nearly as much, which means Iran doesn't have to win a battlefield victory. So Iran is like, if I'm going down, everyone else is going down with me. Iran only has to destabilize the system long enough to make the war unbearable. Well, at first glance, this war looks Iran versus the United States and Israel, but the real pressure point isn't the front line at all. It is the entire Gulf. Yes, let me explain. Because countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain sit right at the center of the storm. There is a meme war going out there. Why the hell is Iran attacking UAE, Saudi Arabia, and all the other countries if the US has attacked Iran? Well, these states are America's closest strategic partners in the region. They host their military bases. They provide logistical support. They anchor the entire security architecture that Washington has built in the Middle East for decades. Basically, it means that these countries never had to care about their military or their intelligence. So US was like, you give me oil, I give you both. But beneath the glittering skylines and massive oil wealth lies a fragile reality. Let's look at the food. If the Strait of Hormuz closes down, the Gulf is cooked. We're talking 90% of imports that are blocked instantly. It's total Hunger Games, but with more humidity and way less catering. Well, they might have reserves of the food and all, but that's a different thing altogether. I am saying if the dependency is 90%. Well, if the dependency is 90%, the daily Middle Eastern is cooked. The second structural problem is the water. So this region has very little natural water. Saudi Arabia's capital, that is Riyadh, would have to be completely evacuated within just 1 week if the Jubail desalination plant gets clipped. A single Shahed drone can effectively delete a multi-billion-dollar desalination plant. One successful strike can shut down water access for an entire city. Suddenly, the conflict is no longer a distant geopolitical struggle. It becomes a domestic emergency. Hospitals struggle, food distribution slows, panic spreads to the cities built on the promise of stability. And when stability disappears, political pressure rises immediately, which means if the conflict begins to threaten food, water, and internal stability, these same US partners may start demanding something very different from Washington. Not escalation, but an end to the war. Let me tell you a secret. Oil is sold in dollars, and these dollars accumulate in Gulf economies. And instead of sitting idle, they are reinvested back to the United States through treasury purchases, through venture capital, through sovereign wealth funds. And some of the most powerful investors on earth come from these funds, including the Public Investment Fund and Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. So these funds control hundreds of billions of dollars and they deploy their capital across the global economy. Saudi Arabia's PIF-owned company, Humaim, dropped a casual $3 billion into Elon Musk's XAI right before it merged with the SpaceX. Abu Dhabi's Royal AI Fund, NGX, jumped headfirst into OpenAI's completely insane $6.6 billion share in the late 2025. Saudi Arabia's Shumain didn't just stop at Musk, they also led a gargantuan $900 million Series C round for a San Francisco-based Luma AI. And I'm not talking about the bubble money. This is hard money. This is the money. Oil revenues from the Gulf feed directly into the financial system that drives American economic growth. Now imagine what happens if that flow slows down. If oil exports collapse or become unstable, Gulf governments suddenly have different priorities. Instead of investing abroad, they begin spending internally, defending infrastructure, stabilizing their economies, securing food and energy supplies. Now, the money that was once powering the financial markets around the world, especially America, boom, America is hurt again. For decades, the United States built the most sophisticated machine around the world. They have stealth bombers, they have satellite surveillance, they have precision-guided missiles, layered air defense systems capable of tracking threats across hundreds of kilometers. But Iran fights a completely different kind of war, an asymmetric war. A modern interceptor missile used by the systems like Patriot or Thar system cost anywhere between $1 and $3 million for a single shot, right? Now compare that to the weapon it is trying to destroy. A simple drone attack may cost between $20,000 to $50,000. Well, that means a $50,000 machine can force a defender to fire a missile that is worth 20 and 30 or even 50 times more than itself just to stop it. So it is a battle of economics because the question stops being who has the strongest weapon. It becomes something far more dangerous. Who can afford to keep fighting longer? Now, the last and the most important reason why America is digging its own grave. Well, modern warfare has created the illusion that the governments can be removed from the sky. Look at history. History keeps delivering the same uncomfortable question. Air power can destroy infrastructure. It can eliminate commanders. It can cripple military capabilities. But it almost never removes an entrenched government by itself. Iraq war began one of the most devastating aerial bombardments in the modern history. Week of strikes shattered Iraqi defenses and destroyed command centers across the country. Yet, the regime only collapsed when the ground troops endured Baghdad. The same pattern appeared in the war in Afghanistan. Initial airstrikes weakened the Taliban very quickly, but stabilizing the country required a massive troop deployments, extended occupations, and years of costly counterinsurgency operations. Now, Iran is not a small state. Its territory is larger than Iraq and Afghanistan combined. Its militaries has spent decades preparing for exactly this type of confrontation. Underground missile bases, hardened facilities, and dispersed command structures make quick decapitation extremely difficult. Just as important is political cohesion. Despite internal divisions, Iran maintains a very strong national identity and a deeply embedded state structure. Removing such a government would not require a few weeks of bombing, it would require a full-scale invasion, hundreds, thousands of troops, years of stabilization, an occupation that could stretch for decades. And that is where the real contrast appears. After Iraq and Afghanistan, the political appetite in Washington for another massive ground war in the Middle East is extremely limited, which leaves the policymakers facing an uncomfortable strategic dilemma. And the strongest part, the American public doesn't want this war. Even inside Washington, the majority doesn't want it. Several Republicans argue that this is not America's fight. Many Democrats in Congress are openly asking why escalation is happening at and America's Middle Eastern partners like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates are quietly signaling that they want stability. They do not want any fire. So for whom is Trump waging this war? If voters don't want it, if the Congress is divided, his allies are nervous, who exactly is this war for?